They called it a welfare check. I call it my home. I'm 65 years old, and if there's one thing I've earned in this life, it's the right to some peace in my own damn house. I worked 40 years swinging a hammer, built my place with my own 2 hands, and I don't answer to anyone under my roof. But apparently, silence for 24 hours now means you're missing. That's what my younger brother and his girlfriend told people last month. I didn't pick up the phone. Not once that day. Not because I was hurt or lost, just because I didn't feel like it. I had a list of chores, a good cigar on the porch, and a ball game humming on the old radio. That's living, if you ask me. But to them, it was cause for alarm, drama, and a full-blown campaign to check on me. This isn't a story about being lost. It's a story about being found, in the worst way. And about the one line I had to draw: you don't cross my doorstep uninvited. It started with the phone buzzing on the counter. A low hum, then another, until it sounded like a hornet trapped in a jar. I glanced at the screen once, saw my brother's name, and left it face down. I was sanding down an old rocking chair I'd promised to fix up, and I wasn't about to put down my tools for a conversation I knew would stretch into half an hour of his girlfriend's voice in the background, adding her 2 cents to every sentence. By noon, I had a dozen missed calls. Then came the texts. Are you okay? Where are you? We're worried. On and on. At first, I shook my head and muttered, worried about what? A man not glued to his phone. I put the device in a drawer and went out back to mow the yard. That's when the escalation began. One of my neighbors stopped by, holding his own phone, asking, "Hey, everything all right? Your brother's girlfriend messaged me. Said you've been missing since yesterday." Missing. That word lit me up like dry kindling. Missing is what you put on a poster at the grocery store, not what you say about a man sitting in his backyard with a glass of sweet tea. I told the neighbor I was fine, sent him on his way, and figured that'd kill the rumors. But by evening, another friend called. Same line. They're talking about coming over to check on you. That's when my patience cracked. Concern is one thing. Spreading the word that I've vanished, and planning to step foot on my porch without an invite, is another. I sat at the kitchen table, looking at the buzzing phone, thinking of every time in my life I'd respected another man's space. My father used to say, you don't cross another man's fence without permission, even if the gate's wide open. He was right. So I typed one message. Simple, sharp. I'm fine. Do not come to my house uninvited. If you're truly worried, call the police. Otherwise, respect my space. Then I turned the phone off again and let the house go quiet. Little did I know, that message would pour more fuel on their fire. The next morning, I woke up early, made myself a pot of coffee, and thought the storm had blown over. Wrong. When I switched the phone back on, it lit up like a slot machine. 27 new messages, 3 voicemails, and a string of missed calls from numbers I didn't even recognize. The first voicemail was my brother. You can't just disappear like that. People are worried. We were about to drive over last night. His tone was sharp, like he was scolding me. The second voicemail was his girlfriend, and her words were worse. If you don't answer, we'll have no choice but to show up and make sure you're not. Well, you know. She let the last part hang, like I was lying somewhere on the floor gasping my last breath. I leaned back in my chair, sipping coffee, and muttered, Lady, if I wanted you in my living room, I'd invite you. By mid-morning, the fallout had spread further. A buddy from church called, confused. Hey, everything all right? Your brother's girl told the prayer chain you might be missing. That one stung. Not because I cared what she said, but because she dragged God's house into my business. I thanked him, told him I was fine, and hung up before he could read me the whole message thread. That's when I realized this wasn't just concern. It was theater. My brother's girlfriend was painting a picture of me as some fragile old man, incapable of surviving one day without supervision. And the more people she pulled in, the more it boxed me in. Neighbors, friends, church folks, all thinking I was lost when I'd been in my workshop the whole time. By noon, there was a knock at the door. Not them, thank God, but another neighbor, holding a casserole dish. She said, We heard you've been having a rough time. I almost laughed. Rough time? I'd been refinishing furniture and grilling steaks. The only rough time was hearing my name dragged through the mud. I accepted the dish, thanked her, and shut the door. That's when the anger really settled in. This wasn't about safety. It was about control, my brother's girlfriend trying to dictate how often I answer my phone, how I live in my own house. And he was letting her pull the strings. So I called him, first time in 2 days. He answered on the first ring. Before he could launch into his lecture, I cut him off. You listen to me, and listen good. I am fine. I am not missing. And if either of you step foot on my property without my say-so, you won't like how it ends. You call first, you ask permission, or you stay home. Got it. There was a pause, then a sigh. But behind him, I heard her voice, sharp, defensive. He's being reckless. What if something really did happen? That's when I knew this wasn't over. That evening, I was out in the yard, sweeping sawdust off the porch, when the text came through. We're coming tomorrow. You don't get a choice in this. It was from her, not my brother. Short, smug, and exactly the kind of message that made my blood boil. I read it twice, shook my head, and set the phone down. You don't get a choice? In my house. That was the moment I knew this had gone too far. Concern had turned into intrusion, and intrusion into entitlement. I spent the rest of the evening thinking. Part of me wanted to just let them come, let them see me sitting in my chair, drinking coffee, and make them feel foolish. But the other part, the part my father raised, said, no, you don't reward bad behavior. You set the line, or they'll walk all over you. So I set the line. I called my neighbor across the road, a retired deputy, and told him what was going on. He laughed at first, then his tone hardened. That's trespassing, plain and simple. If they step foot without your say, you call me or the sheriff. Folks like that don't learn unless someone teaches them. That night, I slept fine. Better than fine, actually, because I knew the next move wasn't mine. It was theirs. The morning came, hot and humid. I poured coffee, pulled up a chair by the front window, and waited. Around 10, I saw the dust cloud down the road, their car. My brother's truck, with her in the passenger seat. He drove slow, like he was proud to be on some rescue mission. I didn't rush. I didn't panic. I just stepped outside, stood on my porch, and watched them roll in. They parked halfway in my driveway, like they owned it. She was out first, waving her phone in the air. We've been worried sick, she yelled, like the neighbors needed to hear. My brother trailed behind her, sheepish, eyes darting to me, then to her, then back again. I let them get close enough to smell the fresh-cut grass, then raised a hand. Stop right there. She blinked, confused. We're here to check on you. No, I said, steady and calm. You're here to cross a line I already told you not to cross. I'm fine. Always was. And you're not welcome unless I say so. Her mouth opened, ready to argue, but I kept going. Concern is calling once, maybe twice. Concern is asking a neighbor to peek if they see my lights on. What you did. Spreading rumors, dragging church into it, showing up here like you're the sheriff? That's control. And I don't tolerate control in my house. For a moment, even my brother looked ashamed. But she? Her jaw clenched, and she muttered, this isn't over. She was right about that. They left my driveway that morning with dust in their wake, but the silence didn't last long. By afternoon, the phone rang again. This time it was my sister from Ohio. She opened with, what's going on? I just got a call saying you were refusing help and living in dangerous conditions. I nearly dropped the receiver. Dangerous conditions? I looked around my spotless kitchen, the polished wooden counters I'd built myself, the freshly mowed lawn outside. The only thing dangerous in my house was the chili I made too spicy last week. Who told you that? I asked, already knowing the answer. Your brother's girlfriend, she said. She made it sound like you were losing it. Said you wouldn't let anyone check on you, and we should be worried. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. It was a campaign. She wasn't just concerned. She was trying to paint me as unstable, the kind of man who couldn't be trusted alone. I kept my voice calm. Sis, I'm fine. Better than fine. I've got food in the fridge, money in the bank, and enough energy to outwork men half my age. What I don't have is patience for people making up stories. She hesitated. I figured. I just had to hear it from you. After I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table, tapping my fingers against the wood. It wasn't about me answering the phone anymore. It was about her need to control the narrative. If she couldn't walk into my house, she'd try to drag my name through every ear in the family. The next twist came that evening. A number I didn't recognize lit up the screen. When I answered, it was a voice I hadn't expected, a social services rep, polite but firm, saying they'd received a concerned report about my well-being. They wanted to know if I'd consent to a wellness visit. That was the straw. My blood pressure spiked, but my voice stayed level. Ma'am, I appreciate your call, but I'm fine. You don't need to send anyone. And if you do, I'll treat it the same way I treated the people who started this mess, as trespassers." She paused, then sighed. "We get calls like this sometimes." I had to check. "Have a good evening, sir." When I hung up, I paced the living room. My father's words echoed in my head again. You don't let folks rewrite your story. Once they do, you're living on their terms, not yours. So I called my brother one more time. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I just laid it out. "This ends now. You rein her in, or the next knock on the door won't be the sheriff she called. It'll be me taking you both to court for harassment. Concern is one thing. Slander is another." For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. Just silence. By the end of that week, it wasn't just phone calls. It was looks. The kind you notice at the hardware store, at the diner, even walking to the mailbox. Neighbors I'd known for years gave me that tilted head stare, the kind folks use when they're too polite to say, "We heard something." At the diner, old Hank, a man I've shared coffee with every Tuesday for 15 years, leaned in and whispered, "Heard you been having trouble. You holding up okay?" His voice carried concern, but the way he looked at me told the truth. He'd heard their story, not mine. That cut deeper than I expected. Not because I needed anyone's approval, but because reputation in a small town isn't just a word, it's currency. You lose it, you lose trust. You lose trust, you lose everything. I stirred my coffee, nodded once, and said, "I'm fine." Always was. But in my chest, a fire was building. Back home, I sat on the porch and thought hard. This wasn't about me ignoring calls anymore. This was about someone trying to rewrite who I am. A man can handle being called stubborn. He can even handle being called rude. But unstable, that's poison. And once it spreads, you can't scrub it clean without leaving scars. So I took action. First step, I called my neighbor, the retired deputy, again. Told him the whole picture. The rumors, the calls, even the social services inquiry. He listened, then said, "You need to get ahead of it. People believe the first version of a story they hear. If you don't speak, hers becomes gospel." That night, I wrote a letter. Simple, direct, 1 page. I explained I was alive, well, and perfectly capable of living on my own. I thanked the community for their concern, but made it clear, no one had the right to spread false claims about my health or safety. And I ended it with one line. Respect a man's home, and respect his silence. The next morning, I pinned that letter on the church bulletin board, handed copies to a few folks at the diner, and left one at the community center. By afternoon, the whispers had shifted. Now people were saying, "He's fine." He even wrote it himself. Of course, my brother's girlfriend didn't like that. She called me, furious, saying I'd embarrassed her. I almost laughed. Embarrassed her? After she dragged my name through mud? I just told her, truth isn't embarrassing. Lies are. And I hung up. That was the turning point. Because for the first time, the power shifted. Instead of me defending myself, it was her scrambling to defend her story. And the more she scrambled, the more people saw the cracks. Still, I knew it wasn't over. A person like her doesn't back down, she doubles down. And sure enough, she was about to make her boldest move yet. The phone rang on a Sunday afternoon, right after church. I almost let it go, but the caller ID said family group chat, conference call. That alone told me trouble was brewing. I answered, and sure enough, half the clan was on the line. My sister, a couple of cousins, even an uncle I hadn't spoken to in years. And who was leading the charge? Not my brother, his girlfriend. Her voice was clear, crisp, and rehearsed. "We're all here because we're worried about you. You're not answering calls, you've been isolating, and people have noticed changes. We think you need help." I sat back in my chair, staring out the window at the oak tree I planted 40 years ago, and let her talk. It felt less like concern and more like a courtroom, and she was playing prosecutor. Finally, I cut in. "Interesting how the loudest voice here doesn't share my last name. Tell me, who made you captain of my life?" There was a pause, a shuffle of awkward breaths. My brother tried to jump in, "She's just trying to," but I stopped him cold. "No, she's not trying. She's deciding. There's a difference. And the rest of you are letting her write a story that isn't true." That's when she played her ace. "We were thinking about holding an intervention, coming down together, making sure you're safe. Because honestly, we're afraid you might not be capable of living alone anymore." The words hit me like a slap. Not because I believed them, but because I could hear the weight they carried in the silence that followed. Capable. That's a dangerous word to throw at a man my age. It's the word folks use when they're thinking about power of attorney or putting someone in a home. I leaned forward, voice steady as a nail driven deep. You want to talk about capable? Last week I fixed a leaky roof, rewired a ceiling fan, and split enough firewood to last through winter. If that's incapability, I'd hate to see what you call achievement. A cousin tried to soften it. We're just worried, you know. You didn't answer. Didn't answer a phone. I interrupted. That's the crime? I've lived 65 years without being tethered to a screen. A man can take a day for himself without being branded incompetent. The line went quiet, except for her huffing into the receiver. Finally, I ended it. Listen carefully. If any of you show up uninvited to my home, it won't be an intervention. It'll be trespassing. And if you keep spreading lies, we'll settle it in court. I didn't build this life to have it dismantled by gossip. Then I hung up. For a long moment, I sat there, staring at the silent phone. My father's voice echoed again. A man's home is his fortress. Guard it. And I knew this fortress had just withstood a siege. But another one was surely coming. The intervention call left me restless for a night. Not afraid, angry. Because I knew where this was headed if I didn't cut it off clean. More rumors, more whispers, and eventually someone knocking with legal papers, telling me I wasn't fit to run my own life. So I decided to do something they didn't expect. I went public. The next Sunday, after service, when the congregation was milling about in the fellowship hall, I cleared my throat and asked for a moment. I don't speak up often. Folks around here know me as the quiet type. But when I do, they listen. I've heard a lot of talk this week, I began. About me being missing, unstable, incapable. Let me set the record straight. I am fine. I've always been fine. The only thing I'm missing is privacy, because some people can't respect silence. Heads turned, murmurs rippled. My brother shifted uncomfortably near the back, his girlfriend stiff at his side, arms crossed. I went on. Concern is calling once. Maybe stopping by if something looks truly wrong. But spreading lies, calling social services, trying to stage an intervention, that's not care. That's control. And I don't tolerate control in my home. The room went quiet. You could hear the coffee pot percolating. I let the silence work for me. Then I finished. So here's my line. If anyone has a real worry, ask me directly. Otherwise, respect my space. Respect my house. And if anyone tries to cross that line again, they'll be dealing with me and the law. I stepped back, folded my arms, and waited. It was my neighbor, the retired deputy, who spoke first. I've seen this man build half the houses in this town. He's more capable than any of us. Leave him be. His words carried weight, and heads nodded. That broke the spell. Conversations shifted. Folks came up to clap me on the shoulder, reassure me they knew the truth. One old friend even chuckled. Hell, if you're unstable, I hope I'm half as unstable when I hit your age. But the best part? Watching her face. My brother's girlfriend, red as a stop sign, realizing her grip on the story had snapped in front of everyone. She tugged his sleeve, hissed something under her breath, and stormed out. My brother followed, looking like a man caught between two storms. That night, for the first time in weeks, I sat on my porch with a cigar and felt the air clear. No buzzing phone, no whispers at the diner, no casserole dishes with pity baked in. Just quiet. The kind of quiet a man earns after 65 years of living by his own rules. And I knew one thing. They'd think twice before trying it again. Because the fortress had spoken, and the gate was locked. Looking back now, I can laugh at the absurdity of it all. A man spends his whole life working, raising a family, paying his dues, and suddenly a day of unanswered phone calls turns him into a missing person in his own town. But beneath the absurdity, there's a truth I won't ignore. Silence makes people nervous. And when folks get nervous, some of them try to take control. I learned something through this mess. Boundaries aren't just fences and locked doors. They're words, rules, and the courage to enforce them. If you don't draw that line, someone else will draw it for you, and they'll place it exactly where it suits them. My brother's girlfriend wasn't worried about me. She was worried about not being able to pull the strings. And once she realized I cut those strings, she showed her true colors. The hardest part wasn't standing up to her. It was seeing how quickly family could be swayed by whispers. People I'd trusted all my life were ready to believe I'd lost my grip, just because one loud voice painted that picture. That taught me another lesson. Reputation isn't permanent. You've got to defend it. the same way you defend your land or your home. But here's the good news. Truth still holds weight. When I stood up in church and laid it plain, people listened. When I spoke calm and steady, not angry, not defensive, the room tilted back in my favor. That reminded me that respect isn't given out of pity. It's earned every time you stand firm without flinching. So what changed in me? I stopped assuming silence would speak for itself. I stopped thinking people would naturally know the truth. Now, if someone crosses the line, I speak up fast, clear, and without apology. My father's words ring louder than ever. A man's home is his fortress. Guard it. And to anyone listening, don't let someone else define your story. Concern is a phone call. Control is a campaign. Learn the difference, and don't be afraid to slam the gate on the second one. Because at the end of the day, peace isn't something you're handed. Peace is something you protect.